Okay, it's time to touch up the images we've been working on in our rendering software. But before we jump into Photoshop, one thing you'll want to think through is the boundaries of each of these images. In particular, each of them has the Lumion logo because we're using Lumion. If you're using some other software, you may have other things you need to crop away. So you want to leave enough space to crop away images, parts of the image you don't want to see. And perhaps you may have images that you want to be square or non-rectangular, round borders. That's okay too. Just be sure that you consider that. For example, I think I'm actually going to maybe turn off this vignette effect because I'm not exactly sure where I want to crop this, and I can crop it later in Photoshop. I have also done the depth of field feature here. I've set it to a particular focal distance, 0.8 meters from the camera. You can do this in Photoshop also, but again, it's worth thinking through because some of them are easier here, such as this one, and some of them are going to be easier in Photoshop. For example, the vignette feature is actually quite easy. Also, images you're going to want to make really big, such as this axonometric view. You want to make sure that you zoom out enough that you can see the whole image, but not so much that you start to make the inner portions lower resolution. The more you zoom out, the fewer the number of pixels available for each individual element. You also don't want to forget that anything that wants to be in plan or elevation view, exterior or interior elevation, you'll want to have that section plane active for those views. And what it means is you'll basically, for the plan view, you'll have to export that separately from the exterior elevations. And for exterior elevations and interior elevations, you'll want to drag the section box vertically, or I guess you're dragging it horizontally to get the vertical cut away the front of the site. Now for exterior elevations, you can actually use the near clip feature in Lumion. It's in the orthographic effect, and just drag this near clip over. Basically, it's from the camera point. I think I've got that about right. That will clip away the front of the landscape. It just doesn't work great cutting through Revit geometry. So for that interior elevation, you will want to crop away the front of the building. And then if the landscape is in the way in Lumion, use that near crop feature to make sure that you don't see trees and other peculiar things. In fact, you could also just turn off all of that stuff in Lumion. You'll also want to note that the far clip feature actually works the same way as the near clip, except it clips far away, so it's clipping the back of the model. And if you, for example, in your interior, you did not want to have the trees in the background, and you could turn them off, but this far clip feature, as I drag it, see how the trees kind of disappear, but I still have the back wall of that interior space. Once you've opened your images in Photoshop, there are two really simple things that you should do for every image. You should do this every time, whether or not you're going to print. The first one is go to the image size menu here. Go to image size, or Control-Alt-I, and you're going to want to check the resolution. Now, even when you're presenting electronically, you want consistent resolution. And when you print, you want the resolution to be at least 200 pixels per inch. And make sure this button to resample is not checked. And I'll show you why. When I change this number to 200, you see how the width and height in inches changes? And that is kind of the largest dimension you can print these images. We exported at a very high resolution, so it should be more than enough for our project. However, it's always good to check, especially when you're dealing with things like image samples from the internet. Open those up too and make sure that they have enough dimension so that you can print them properly. Otherwise, they will look pixelated, and nothing looks sloppier than pixelated images on your boards. Well, actually, there are other things that look sloppier, but that one's fairly sloppy, on the sloppy scale, that is. And you can see the image doesn't look any different. Again, you should do this for all of your images. The other thing that you should do is use the crop feature. I'll click the crop button, and click the crop button, and you'll get these little grips in the corners. And our goal here is to remove that annoying Lumion logo here in the bottom left of our image. Now, a couple things while we're zooming around here in Photoshop. You can scroll your scroll wheel and it moves the image up and down. If you hold down Alt, it zooms around your cursor, so wherever your cursor happens to be. And if you hold down the space bar, that's sort of like pan. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out. There are other zoom controls. They're down here on the lower left. You can change the percentage. You can kind of zoom to different features. And it will, by the way, tell you your image size down here in the lower left. So you can come and check any number of different things. Okay, to crop it, pretty easy. You just crop by clicking and dragging. And of course, the goal here is to create a nice looking image. And there's many different philosophies, but the biggest thing is when you are cropping this image, you see how there's kind of a 9 square box or set of boxes? Typically, whatever you want to be the main focus of your view should be in the middle. Now, I can stretch this to get a little more foreground, but I don't want too much of that Lumion logo, so you kind of have to experiment with it. You can also do this cropping in your board layout program, Lumion. However, it's really easy as long as you're in Photoshop. It is a photo editing program. So for each of your images, see if you can get rid of that Lumion logo. And when you're done cropping, by the way, there is a confirm button up here in the center of your screen, and there you go, it crops it. You can always undo, and there's other ways to do this, also using masks and things like that, but this is perfect for us. Now, what if you really don't feel like you want to crop away that part of the image? You know, maybe there's some reason that you really like the front foreground of the image or whatever. You know, there are many reasons that you wouldn't want to lose that, but you don't feel like going back to Lumion and re-rendering. Well, Photoshop has another option here, which is under the Edit menu. There's an option called Content Aware Fill. When I do that, what Photoshop tries to do is say, well, what's the context of the thing you've selected and how can I make it look balanced? And in this case, you see it does actually a pretty good job. Hit apply and OK. And like magic, away goes the Lumion logo. Now, there is a little bit of a relic in that area. I could do something like maybe a better selection, but overall, I'm probably going to end up cropping that a little bit in my main view, so it's not super important. So that's an alternative way to get rid of the logo. The more complex the context, the more difficult it is to get that little feature to work. Another thing that you should do for all of your images is adjust things like the shadows and the lighting, particularly on things like exterior elevations, interior elevations. Often the shadows are kind of annoying. And there's a filter that can help us out here. It's called the Camera Raw filter. And photographers will use this filter to adjust the exposure and the shadows and highlights in their images. Obviously, these aren't photographic images, but they're pretty darn close. And what you do, call up the filter and you have a preview window and you can control all sorts of different things. So for example, in this one, the shadows are a little too dark for my taste. You see how I can just kind of lighten them up? I can also do things like increase or decrease the contrast. Now, if you remember, these are features that we had in Lumion. However, we can adjust them here. If your whites are too white, we can de-whitify them. And it's the same with the dark colors. The blacks can become more intense. Finally, some images. The saturation should be dropped down. This is particularly true for images at night. Nighttime, there's an effect called the Perkinja effect where you don't perceive colors as much, so you might as well remove it from your images so that they look correct. Either way, these simple filters can really make a big difference. I'll just click OK, and you see how our image looks a lot better, a lot crisper in our view. Another little bit of touch-up that we can do here in Photoshop is draw in that heavy line that we like to see down on the ground at on our elevations, our exterior elevations. And to do that, there is a tool. And depending on the kind of workspace that you have visible, you may or may not have the pen tool or pencil tool. You may have the brush tool. But the pencil tool is all we need. And what you'll see here, my cursor has a circle. That's the size of the image. If you don't see anything, hit the left or right brackets until you get an image of or preview of the size of the image you want. And one little trick that we can do here in Photoshop is put that line on a different layer. And I'll show you how to do that. Basically, over here in the lower right of your screen, you'll see an option, a bunch of options for our layers panel. Photoshop has layers just like a lot of our other programs, and you can just add a new layer, and you can name it, although we're only drawing one thing, so we don't have to. And you can draw just by clicking and dragging. See how I'm drawing? And it will show up just on this new layer. Now, I don't actually want that squiggly line. What I want is a straight line. Well, with the pencil tool, again, let's turn this layer back on. And I'm going to do Control A to select all, and then delete everything that's on there. I just literally hit the delete key. Anyway, to draw a straight line, you just click and drag, but hold down the Shift key, and that will force it to be a straight line. Now, I kind of messed up a little bit there, and also I want it to be down here. So I can click and drag, and you see how it draws that nice dark line on the ground. Now, if you happen to draw it, whoops, up here, let me draw it straight, I'll just click, and you can actually click several times to draw straight lines just from point to point. You can select those lines, and right now I have everything selected. I remember I did Control A. I can do Control D to deselect everything. And then there are a number of different selection tools. I can use the rectangular marquee tool. Basically draws a rectangle, and anything on this current layer will get selected. And then I can use the move tool and move it. I can manipulate it, and this is easy if you're having trouble seeing the very bottom of your elevation, or you're not sure and you want to kind of nudge it up and down. You can just use the arrow keys. Lastly, you can just hit delete and it goes away. If you don't see the transformation controls, by the way, sometimes I think it may be default they're not visible. Just select it using the selection tools as mentioned, but click this transform tools button and you'll see these little boxes. And there's all sorts of modifiers, holding down shift and that sort of thing. Anyway, I'll click the checkbox. I'll hit delete because I don't want that. And you can see it looks so much better with that nice dark line down on the ground. Another drawing which can really benefit from the heavy line around it is an interior elevation. And let's crop our interior elevation here. Let me just click the crop tool and draw a box. And I'm going to leave a little extra, show you why in a minute, because I like to kind of show the door opening in the outline of that interior elevation. So what we can do, we could draw the individual lines, but you can also use the selection tool, rectangular marquee, and draw the the kind of perimeter of the interior elevation. And you can add to that by holding down Shift, and I can add in these little areas that kind of jut out where the doorway and the window are. And if you think about it, if you kind of follow the edge surface of the interior, those doorway openings kind of go forward towards the outside, and then they come back out where there's a structural element, and then go back outside. Anyway, once you have that area selected, first of all, you'll want to come down and make yourself a brand spanking new layer for your drawing. And then under the Edit menu, there's something called Stroke. And Stroke is the kind of line that you can create. And wherever you have sketched a line, you'll see your you'll see a line created in Photoshop. Let's see. I don't know what a good dimension is, probably about 12 pixels. And you can actually make these lines any color you want. Let's just stick with black. And if I click OK, it's a little hard to see. Let me turn off the background layer, and I'll hit Control D to get rid of those marching ants. But you can see there's a nice heavy line there where the outline was. Now, if it's not dark enough for you, you can go back and select to the select menu and reselect that outline. It's a little light for my tastes, actually. And let's choose Edit, Stroke again, and maybe we'll make this a little bit more hefty. Maybe we'll make it 16 pixels, and OK. And I could have hit Undo to also undo that change, but there you go. Now you've got a nice dark outline on your screen. Now, what I want to get rid of this little bits here at the top and bottom of my screen here. Well, there's one more trick up my sleeve, which is go back to your select menu, reselect what you just had selected. But now, when you have a selection tool active, and I have this marquee selection active, you can right-click on that selection and choose any number of things. There's a lot of fun things in here, but select Inverse. And now everything that you had selected is unselected, and everything that was unselected is now selected. It's kind of a backwards world. And let's go to our background layer here. Now, on the background layer, I don't think it's going to let us delete anything because it has this little padlock on it. But you can just double click on that and click OK to unlock it. See how the padlock is gone now? And now I just hit the delete button on my keyboard. And when you hit delete in Photoshop, you have this funny kind of thing where it's this background checkerboard, and that is super handy for seeing when basically there's nothing there. There's no pixels. I know not everybody likes that. So under the Edit menu, you can control that. There's a Preferences menu, and where transparency is the one that you want to change, you can make that, instead of it being kind of like a medium checkerboard, you can make it a large checkerboard, or you can just make it none at all. There are times when you actually do want to see if you have transparency or not. For us right now, we're probably good. Okay. And there you go. That's your adjusted interior elevation with a nice heavy outline. One thing that you can do really easily in Photoshop is fix the poché, which never seems to work exactly right in Lumion. And to do that, we basically need to select all of the gray area. Now, in my case, I don't actually have that great of an export here. So I could try something like this magic wand tool. And the way that works is you can come and click on a color, and based on whatever settings you have, so in this case, I'm going to look for, I don't know, I'll choose contiguous and see if I can get all of the gray. And you see how pretty quickly it can select almost all the gray, but it's also getting like some boundaries of the flooring. Well, I can change the tolerance. Maybe I'll drop it way down because I really just want an exact match. Now when I click on it, I get it, but I'm still getting some weird little spots here. I could try tweaking this some more. However, I'm just going to deselect again. Maybe the easiest thing is just to use the rectangular marquee tool. When you use that tool, I think we saw before, you can use Shift to add selection areas and Alt to remove selection areas. So I can remove this whole interior space, and I can remove these individual rooms as well. And in the end, when you do this, you'll basically end up with the entire perimeter of the building selected, and none of the interior spaces. Now, I should also remove where the windows are. There's all sorts of subtleties that you could add to this, and take your time, of course, but you don't need to watch me select all of this stuff. So I've just gone ahead and used that same tool, and you can use any number of combination of these tools to get you the same selection area. I could even bring in the plan from Revit and overlay it and use that if you're handy dandy at Photoshop. Either way, like we did before, make yourself a new layer. And in fact, I'm going to turn off the background layer so you can see what we have selected, these kind of marching ants going along. And then, like we did before, we have two things we can do. We can do our stroke menu, if you remember, and we can create a nice dark outline. Once you've got those lines looking good, the other thing we want to do is add in some fill color for the poché. Now, We could absolutely just go and there is a fill button, just like we used the content aware fill before. There's just a regular fill button, and in that one you can choose any number of things. You can choose patterns, gray, black or white. I could choose a color and create a solid color here. When you click OK, you'll see the color fill in. However, another trick that's even better, and it allows us some flexibility for those of us who change our minds a lot, is here in the Layers menu, right in the middle at the bottom, there's a special button. It looks like a circle, half black, half white, and there's a bunch of things you can do here. These are called adjustment layers, and you can create a layer which will kind of adjust everything below it. In this case, I'll choose solid color. And it's the very topmost one, and it's the simplest one. And in that menu, you can see already it has filled whatever I had selected with that color. And I can just drag this menu and choose a different color. And you can choose a color that actually looks pretty cool or that somehow complements the colors in your project. And if you look in the menu, here in the Layers menu, there's a teeny tiny little icon with the area selected that we had originally selected. That's in white. That's called a mask. And this mask, anywhere that's black, will not have the color. Anywhere that's white will have the color. And in fact, you can come in and edit the mask and just paint black and white to change what it's masking. But anyway, enough on that. I'll just click OK. And I'll even drag it below the layer with the lines, and you see how the lines become a little more prominent. Now, if you're like, oh, I don't like that color anymore, let me turn the background, oh no, I don't like that color, you can actually just double click on the color here in the Layers menu, and it brings up the poché, the solid color menu, and you can very quickly make a change. So there you go, some nice poché. So one thing that Photoshop really excels at is dealing with, you guessed it, photographs. And in our case, sometimes it's really nice to have a good high quality photo, not the kind of strangely, I don't know, uncanny valley kind of photos that you see in Lumion. And so I can go, and I'm going to go to Bing, and I may have mentioned before that I'm not an advertisement for Bing, but thanks to lawsuits, Google doesn't make it quite as easy to get images. But nobody's sued Bing yet. I don't know why. And you can type in any number of things, but person standing is probably good for my view, and transparent background is a great thing to type in. You can also type in PNG or even something called alpha channel to get the same result. And what you'll see when you filter this for images is that you see a bunch of images. You can also, if you click the filter button, and every search engine has these filters, you can filter it for extra large images. That's what we want because our image is very high resolution. The other thing is you'll definitely want to use free images, not ones that are licensed. And I'm sure when you search for things, you get things that have watermarks on them. This will filter out those. Anyway, the other thing to be aware of is when you click on an image, oh, there's a lovely preview. Do not select this image, but instead make sure that you go and follow through to get the highest image. Usually what will happen is you'll click on it and it will zoom a little bit. That will allow you to get the highest resolution. The other one is basically a preview. You can right-click on this image, and usually there's an option to save image, and you can put it into the folder, wherever your folder is. In all likelihood, it will be a PNG file. And the reason for that is PNGs preserve the transparency. Now, when I open that image in Photoshop, remember that checkerboard that we hid earlier? Well, I turned it back on, and you can see it's basically just the image, and in fact, it comes in, the image is already selected. And this is a great check because if there's no background, I can just do Control-C to copy and go to my image I want to add this to, and then Control-V to paste it in, and there is my person. Now, I do want to get him in the right position here in my view. So one thing you have to consider is that the eye height is probably going to be the eye height of everyone else in this view. And then the feet, well, I just put the feet wherever they belong. So if his feet wants to be back here, I can move him to the back of the space. If I want him to be in the foreground, I could even make it appear that he is way in the foreground by just dragging him to this much larger size here. And click the confirm button, and now it looks like he's a presenter showing us this terrific project. And you can do things in the back with the background image if you want. Again, just double click on it to make it editable. And maybe I want to fade out the background image a little bit or something like that. Just to make it seem like he's an actual presenter. Some people also like the silhouette people that you can find on the internet or in Lumion. So use those if you prefer. But really, every perspective drawing, anything that's 3D, even exterior and interior elevations, they should have people in them. And you can see how using this photographic person, it's just a lot crisper and sharper than these other people. Of course, it takes a lot more time. Another really simple feature that you can add to some of your images, particularly the vignettes, is a vignetting effect. And what that is, if you remember in Lumion, it kind of darkens the perimeter of the drawing. And all we have to do is select that perimeter in our drawing, and we can just make it dark. And to do that, you can use any number of tools, but the elliptical marquee tool is probably the one that's going to give us an effect close to that Lumion one, and maybe let's shoot for that. Now, right now, I have the middle of this drawing selected. If you remember, we can right-click on that and select the inverse, and you can kind of see that the background here, let me see if I can turn that off, apparently I can't, is selected. The other thing you can do is soften the edge of the selection. If you just come in here, right-click on it, and choose Feather, and let's pick 50 pixels, I think is the default. And it won't look all that different, but when you create a color adjustment layer, solid color adjustment layer, you see how it kind of softens the edge a little bit? And I'll click OK. And in this adjustment layer, you can kind of see the preview here. It's kind of got a slightly softer edge, and now I can lower down the opacity of this layer. The other thing is you can change, there is something called blending modes. If you change the blending mode to multiply, that helps to preserve some of the details that are in that background behind the solid color. So again, there's the view with it, there's the view without it. And if you don't like that particular selection, you can experiment with different ones. Here, I'm going to go with a rectangular marquee, select this area, do what I did before, select the inverse, right-click on that selection and feather it, and maybe this time I'll do, I don't know, 200 pixels. Get a softer feather, and you can see how it looks kind of softer. And I'll create another black adjustment layer and see how I like that. And that one's a little more rectilinear. I'll make it the multiply view blending mode, and then let's drop it down a little bit here. And you can see how that it just creates a little bit of additional focus on that center of the image. One last cool Photoshop technique is to create some funky plan graphics, maybe a white line on black background kind of plan that you can use when you're laying out your board. I'm not quite sure if I want to use it or not, but anyway, if you take your plan view and export an image of it, just go to File, Export, and then down here, hidden at the bottom of the export menu, there is an export image option. And this is a full-sized image here. It's a scale image. So let's make it 100%. And this is not a shaded view, so we can just go with lossless. But make sure it's a nice high resolution, 300 pixels per inch. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually up this resolution to maybe 300% just to get a sharper image, because any curves or things like that, they sometimes can get a little dotty. Anyway, and then you'll click OK to save. And let's take a look at that in Photoshop. And really, it's quite simple. You just go to the Adjustment Layers menu. Way down at the bottom, there's one called Invert. And what that does, it turns it from black lines on a white background to white lines on a black background. And this can be just a really cool way to see your floor plan. You don't have to do it this way, of course. And the poché may look weird, or there may not be any poché in there depending on what you had in your view. But you can see it's just a different look to your drawings. And one of the many pieces that you can use when you compose your boards. So you have gone through, opened every single one of your images, the 10 architectural drawings and the 4 images of materials for your project. Again, you can have more images, you can have more materials, that's okay. But open every one, check the image size using Photoshop. Use your cropping feature to get rid of the Lumion logo and add in any other features that you think would look nice. Poché, additional scale figures, even just some extra lines to make those elevations look sharp. I guess there's only one exterior and one interior elevation. But anyway, there you go. Once you've done all that, you should save your files. And how hard could it be to save? Well, there is one little trick. When I choose Save, in this drawing, I have added a layer, so it will not let me save it as a JPEG anymore. It wants to save it as a PSD, a Photoshop file format, and that's okay. When you're working using the Adobe Suite, most of the file formats are kind of interoperable in the other programs, so using this Photoshop file format is the way to go. It also will allow you to edit it later on. So be sure you save each one, give it a name that is descriptive of what it is, and then when you've done all of your images, you should be good to go for the next stage, which is creating a board.